Now for the best part, the taste test. I'm scooping up this creamy broth and making sure I get plenty of Ballejjas in there. It's as good as I remember. Hey Carnivore tribe, welcome back. You know, it's 30 degrees out today here in the jungle. It's feeling pretty cold and it's raining hard. It's cooled down and I'm craving the ultimate comforters. And this dish right here, this brings me right back to my childhood. And it feels just like a warm hug, a perfect addition to a cool, rainy day here in the jungle. If you're curious how to make this 100% carnivore-friendly meal, stick around. The Ballejjas won't disappoint, I guarantee it. Let's make this rich, creamy bowl of goodness together.
So here's how this came together. I actually started my day by cooking up some bacon because in my kitchen, bacon is always the filler food of choice. I used my Dutch oven and seriously, no pun was intended. It is a Dutch recipe. But because I like higher sided pots to keep the splatter down, because in my kitchen, cleanup is everything, right? Like as much as I can do to minimize the cleanup, it's better in my books. So after the bacon was done, I set aside a few strips for this recipe, and the rest will probably disappear by tomorrow if I'm perfectly honest. But I poured the cooled bacon fat into a glass jar that I'll use for my cooking oil stash for the week. But the real reason I used this Dutch oven today was I had visions of making this hearty soup right in the Dutch oven, letting those crispy little bit of bacon bites on the bottom add another layer of flavor. So into this pot goes 1 cup of water to start and 2 cups of my homemade beef broth that I had stashed in the freezer from a chuck roast that I did in the Instapot a few weeks ago. It's collagen rich, beefy, and perfect as a base. You could also use chicken broth. It would also work here well if that's what you have in the freezer or the fridge. So while that's heating up, I got to work on the stars of this recipe, the Balletjas. I call this soup Ballejars Soup. When I was in high school, I remember my grandmother used to live right across the street, and during lunch break, I would always run across, and most times she'd have this Ballejars soup made up for me because my mom would never make it at home. And it's an old Dutch recipe. It always hit the spot. It just filled me up and yet didn't make me feel like bloated or heavy. And it just really, during the winter months, really warmed my soul. So that's what I felt like today. So while that is heating up, I'm going to start working on these Ballejjas. They're way simpler than you think. It's what I'm adding into the container here, or the glass bowl, is 1.5 pounds of ground beef, 2 farm fresh eggs, and I basically am just mixing this until it's smooth. And then I'll roll these into little meatballs. You'll see in a second. So basically I'm just trying to get the egg spread throughout the ground beef. It is the way to bind the meat, to bind the Ballejjas, so that when you form the Ballejjas and you put them into the soup or into the broth, they don't all crumble into little pieces of hamburger. So this is pretty well getting to the consistency that it feels like it's spread out pretty evenly. I'm just going to take a moment and we'll go over and we will check how the broth is doing. Okay, and everything seems to be melting down nicely, so we'll just continue to let this simmer and we'll go back to making our Ballejjas. Okay, and we've got our mixture that's well mixed. It's ground beef, 1.5 pounds of ground beef, and 2 farm fresh eggs. And I'm just going to form them into Ballejjas, or meatballs if you'd like to call them. They're a little bigger than a marble, but smaller than a quail egg. Kind of about the size of a dime, maybe slightly larger. It doesn't really matter about consistency here. It's just trying to keep them a fairly small size so they're easy to pick up on your spoon and eat like a bite full. And then also so that they cook quickly and thoroughly. Now, some of you may cringe at the fact that these balls are not going to be deep fried or fried in bacon grease prior to making the soup. They're just going to be placed into the soup. But that is how Ballejars soup is made. And I find that if I do fry them up, they actually get a little tougher. So if you can get past the thought that the consistency is going to be a little weird, it's actually quite delicious having them so tender and smooth. They basically melt in your mouth, and that's another comfort of this meal. So I'll just continue doing this with the entire pound and a half. Of course, some people might think, well, if you make larger meatballs, it'll be done much quicker. But art doesn't happen overnight either. Like, the more time and energy you put into this meal, the more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, eloquent, I don't even know. I can't think right now. But it definitely makes it a unique dish, and one that I can't believe I haven't gone to earlier. Now, of course, the traditional Ballejars soup is vegetable broth with a few vegetables in there as well. And I'm not going to do that today. I've converted this recipe to be carnivore friendly by not only not adding vegetables, but by adding cheeses to thicken the sauce and everything else that's carnivore friendly. And you could do this without the cheese, but it definitely wouldn't be as rich and creamy. So now that we have all these balls made, and to my liking, the size, the smaller the better in my view, we can go back to the pot and start continuing on with the broth. And in order to do that, we have to get some cream cheese. And this is a full brick of cream cheese, just breaking it down so that it can help it melt a little quicker. I'm not one for an immense amount of patience. I think most of my friends would say I have a lot of patience, but when it comes to cooking and being hungry while you cook, there's not a lot of patience there. So I'm breaking up this cream cheese in hopes that it will break down quicker and blend in with this fatty base nicely. So as you can see, the pot is starting to get to boiling temperature. My stove gets super hot, so I actually had to shut it off midway through, just because I don't want to burn any of the cheeses on the bottom, or if there's any leftover residue from the bacon still on the bottom. I do not want a burnt flavor in this soup. So I'm just trying to scrape down the edges because the cheese is starting to melt. So I'm trying to get everything to mix together nicely. And I got to a point where I'm like, I'm not waiting anymore. So I went and got my handy immersion blender. And as you can see, it turned this creamy, brothy with chunks of cheese soup into a creamy, smooth soup within literally seconds. That's all I had to do. And now it was completely, perfectly mixed. No more chunks of cream cheese floating around, and ready for the Ballejars. Okay, now we're going to season it a bit with some Redmond's real salt. You know I like things salty, but here a word of caution, because the cream cheese does have a salty flavor to it. I would not add too much. And honestly, after tasting this bowl of soup, next time I would actually salt the meatballs, because every bite of meatball, it felt like I needed a little more salt. Now here you can see I'm putting the meatballs gently, one by one, into the soup mixture. Word of caution, don't dump them all in at once. Not only do I not like hot soup splashing out at me, it's not fun, but you don't want them to clump all together in the soup. By putting them in one by one gently, they're hitting that hot soup and starting to cook so that they won't stick together, they won't clump together. Some will end up floating, some will end up sinking, and trust me, they cook up beautifully. And for those of you cringing that I didn't fry the meatballs first, this is how my Oma made the soup. And it's totally traditional in Dutch soups to just throw in the balls uncooked. The result is juicy, tender little bites that burst with flavor in every spoonful. Now, mind you, in my grandmother's recipe, she would add spices to the balls like dried onion or nutmeg, which obviously added more flavor. But in my next soup, not this one, I will flavor the meatballs themselves with the Redmond's real salt to give it that little extra kick. But honestly, it was delicious without the nutmeg and the dried onion. Now, if you're someone who can handle spices, I encourage you to try it that way. But for me, I'm very sensitive, so I try to leave out as much spice as I can. So I let everything here simmer for about 40 minutes once all the balls have been added. And then I'll pull it off the heat to cool slightly. And let me tell you, this already smells amazing without being fully cooked. Just the broth alone, it's dragging me. It wants me to try it. But with the raw meat in it right now, I think I'll wait. Oh, it smells wonderful. So believe it or not, this has been simmering on low, and yet it's still a rolling boil on my stove. It's been simmering for 40 minutes now, and like I just said, the smell is unbelievable. So I'm gonna scoop up some of this creamy goodness and try to get as many meatballs, or at least a couple of meatballs, into my creamy broth, and then we'll give it a taste test. And of course, I successfully fill the bowl and forget to record what I'm adding to it. So at this stage, I added 2 pieces of crispy bacon broken up into small pieces, so that with every spoonful I get a little chunk of bacon, a little bit of broth, and a balletja or meatball. And I have to say, you know, if you can tolerate cheese, a little bit of cheese sprinkled on top, maybe some mozzarella or even some mozzarella balls thrown into the soup, would add another layer of flavor and another texture. But this is perfect for me. I am sensitive to dairy, so I try not to eat too much of it. With the cream cheese already being in this soup, that is more than enough dairy for me. And seriously, creamy broth, juicy meatballs, and bacon on a cool rainy day, how can life get any better than that? I hope you enjoyed today's recipe, and I'm sending you bacon-scented blessings for the week ahead. And please remember, if you enjoy this content, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, and even share with a friend who might benefit from it. It really helps to grow the channel. Sending you lots of love, and again, bacon-scented blessings for the week ahead. Love you guys. Take care. Hasta luego.